Today, we wander with Perpetua and Felicity. They lived from 181 to 203. They are the patrons of mothers, expectant women, and butchers. Their feast day is March 7th. Perpetua was a rich young wife in Carthage who had just given birth to a son. Felicity was Perpetua's slave and was about to have a baby of her own. Perpetua's mother and brothers were Christian, but her father was a pagan. So when Perpetua told her father that she wanted to be baptized, he flew into a rage. "Why can't you just keep your faith secret?" he asked her. "Don't you know you can be killed for becoming a Christian?" "Do you see this jar of water on the table?" Perpetua asked him. "Can you call it anything but a jar of water? Can you call it a hurricane? Or an elephant?" "No," her father said. "I'm a Christian," Perpetua told him. "I can't call myself anything else." Her father was so angry, he didn't talk with her for days. While he still wasn't speaking to her, Perpetua was baptized, along with Felicity and several other slaves. And just as Perpetua's father feared, when the Roman rulers heard about it, Perpetua and her friends were all arrested, along with her teacher, Satyrus. The prison they were thrown in was hot and dark. The guards pushed and shoved the prisoners, even Felicity, who was about to give birth. Worst of all, they took Perpetua's baby son away from her. She wasn't allowed to see him until her mother and brother brought the child to her so she could nurse him. Nobody knew what was going to happen next. Would they be set free? Would they be killed? "You should ask God for a vision," Perpetua's brother told her. So Perpetua prayed, and that night God gave her a dream. In the dream, she saw a huge bronze ladder. All along it were swords, spears, hooks, and knives. The only possible way to climb it was to always look up, never down. If someone looked away for even a moment, they'd be torn apart. At the bottom of the ladder was a giant serpent ready to bite anyone who tried to climb. Satyrus, Perpetua and Felicity's teacher, was in the dream too. He started to climb up the ladder. "Don't let the snake bite you," he called back to Perpetua. "It will not hurt me," Perpetua said, "in the name of Jesus Christ." When the snake heard that name, it bowed its head, afraid. So instead of stepping on the first rung of the ladder, Perpetua stepped on the snake's head. Then she climbed all the way up the ladder to a beautiful garden. It was full of thousands of people dressed in white. "Welcome, child," a man said, and handed her a bowl of sweet milk. Perpetua could still taste the sweetness when she woke up. But when she told her brother the vision, they both knew what it meant. She wouldn't be set free. She would be killed for her faith. Perpetua's father came to visit her in jail, weeping. "Have pity on my gray hairs," he said, kissing her hands. "You've always been my favorite. Why don't you just give up your faith?" "We don't live in our own power," Perpetua told him, "but in the power of God." When Perpetua and Felicity and their friends were put on trial, her father came holding her baby. "Just give a sacrifice for the emperor," he said, "and this can all be over. Come home and raise your son." The judge didn't want to sentence Perpetua to death either. "Why don't you just do as your father says?" he asked. But Perpetua and Felicity and their friends refused to deny their faith. So all of them were sentenced to death. In the prison, it came time for Felicity to deliver her child. While the jailers made fun of her in that hot, dark cell, she went into labor and gave birth to a beautiful daughter. Because Felicity couldn't care for her little girl, she gave her to a free Christian woman who promised to adopt her. The judge decreed that Felicity, Perpetua, and her friends should all be killed just 2 days later during a feast in the amphitheater, in front of thousands of people who thought that seeing them die was nothing more than watching a game. Waiting in prison, Perpetua had another dream. She dreamed that when she was taken into the amphitheater, she turned into a man. Another man was there to fight her. He tried to trip her, but she kicked him in the face. As she rained blows down on his head, she realized she wasn't even touching the ground anymore. She was flying. And when she won the fight, she was given a branch as a reward. Satyrus had a dream in prison as well. He dreamed that they were transported by 4 angels to a beautiful garden, where there were rose trees as big as cypresses, with leaves that sang. In the garden were other people who had been killed for their faith, and a building with walls made of light where they met a man with a white beard surrounded by 4 elders. The day of the feast, Perpetua went into the amphitheater with her friends, singing, "You judge us," they told people who had come to watch them die, "but God judges you." First, the men were led into the ring with wild beasts. Perpetua and Felicity watched as their friends were torn apart by leopards, bears, and a wild boar. The crowd loved it. But when Perpetua and Felicity were brought out, the crowd fell silent. They were shocked to see two young mothers, stripped and in danger of being trampled by a wild cow. So before the cow could kill them, Perpetua and Felicity were taken out of the ring. Perpetua was in an ecstasy, a trance of faith so deep that she didn't realize anything had happened to her. "When were we thrown to the beast?" she asked. Her friends and her brother, who had been watching, showed her wounds to her to prove that she had already been sent into the ring. Before they dragged Perpetua and Felicity back out, she said her last words to her brother. "Stand fast in faith," she told him, "and love one another." Then Felicity and Perpetua were sent back into the ring. In the ring, a soldier had been ordered to kill them by the sword. But the soldier was young. He didn't know what he was doing, so when he stabbed Perpetua, she cried out in pain, but she wasn't killed. Finally, Perpetua placed the blade on her neck herself. The young soldier sliced her throat, and she died. But her story wasn't over, because she had written it down while she was in prison. After her death, it spread around the Roman Empire like wildfire. Some churches even read it during their services. And many of the people who saw how Perpetua and Felicity died became Christians. Even the jailer who had held them once in prison.